Hi, this is Tracy, Hails Fast, with Right On Four Corners on KSJE 90.9 FM in Farmington, New Mexico. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with H. Lee Barnes about his award-winning collection of short stories, Life is a Country Western Song. Good morning, Lee.
Good morning to you.
I really enjoyed Life is a Country Western Song. The 12 stories in there are really well written and they're very rich.
Well, thank you. I tried to make them rich.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they're not making me rich.
I understand how that goes. Writers have to look for riches in other ways, I think.
I think so. Yes.
So all these characters and all these stories, they're not related to one another. Are these a collection of stories you've been writing over the years, or how did they come about?
Well, some of them date back probably as far as 12 or, well, actually, one of them dates back better than 15 years. Mm-hmm. So, in a sense, that's what happened. But I think the collection came together when I did in the last 7 or 8 stories over a span of about 4 years or 5 years.
Wow.
And then when I looked back, I said, well, what fits in here? And there were 3 or 4 stories that were actually initially part of the collection that the editor cut out of the book for one reason or another.
Right.
And I'm not sure. I'm not sure I agreed with him or didn't agree with him, but that's what happens. So that's actually kind of the genesis of the books. Is that, as you described it, they come together over a period of time. They did, and I think I was trying to capture. And the reason for the title, of course, Life is a Country Western Song. I wanted to capture a lot of the themes that occur in country western songs, mm-hmm. but without the sentiment that occurs in a lot of the songs. I didn't want any. I don't write for sentiment,
right?
And I think that's part of what makes it maybe a little bit too stark for some people's taste.
Oh, very powerful, though. One of the similarities the stories have is, of course, the setting. They're all set in the southwestern area, some in Las Vegas, some in Arizona. I love the one set in Kingman, Arizona, of all places.
Well, that's my nearest town now.
Uh-huh.
I live in the Walnut Valley in the middle of nowhere. Kingman's an interesting place because it's a town that has 4 independent gun shops where you go and buy guns, but it doesn't have a bookstore. And it's a population of 28,000 people, and I think that in some ways defines Kingman.
I think it does. And the guy who is first encountered says, "I'm in Kingman because I am in witness protection."
And it was actually a joke. That actually occurred in real life.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was. Yeah, it occurred at a place called the Hot Rod Cafe, and as was my habit, gathering. I do that as a writer, is gather people's stories in mm-hmm. odd ways. And I said, "What happened to bring you to Kingman?" And that's what I ask most people here, and that's what he laid on me. He said, "The Witness Protection Program." But he was putting me on. I just thought it was a great line.
It is a great line. I'm going to remember that. What is your favorite story in this collection?
I'm not certain. I think it's either Sheets or a Cop Story. Both are a little bit hard.
They are.
But I think, yeah, I think, and I really like the opening story, Wide Open Space.
I like that too.
So it's difficult for me to say, but I know that when I wrote a cop story, this doesn't usually happen with a story. I usually go through as many as 7, 8, 10 drafts, and the cop story came out in about 2 intense drafts and then a little bit of editing.
Wow.
No, I did it in 2 days. The cop story, actually, I was a cop, and I did go to a trailer where an elderly couple had died, one probably from just natural causes, and the other one lay down next to him. The wife lay down next to him, and she drank herself to death.
Oh, wow.
And they just laid, and there was a boxer, and I had a boxer when I was a kid, so it really struck me as harsh. And then there was a woman who said he tried to eat them, and I went, no, please,
he didn't.
He didn't. I mean, that's the last thing. He just wanted to bring them alive. I mean, he probably wanted to bring them alive so he could eat, but
right.
But it was so that's how it actually began.
Wow.
And how do you shape everything around that?
Well, you mentioned the first story about Nevada, and in a very short story, we know all about her sad background and her redemption.
This is actually, unfortunately, a sad thing that happens, especially in larger cities. But Vegas, because of the transient nature of people in and out of there, was a beehive for runaways and young women who were vulnerable, and of course the pimps hung around at places like the old bus station downtown, and it's that's sad, that predatory behavior. And I wanted to capture that, but I wanted somebody who could survive it, somebody who could go at the other end and reshape a life. Right. The other part of it is that I think that my characters in many ways reflect, I think, what all of our lives are like, that we are haunted by the very fact that we live. It's something that is, in its own way, pretty hard to understand. Why? Because the question, why am I alive? And so we try to give purpose to all of that. And I don't think it ever goes away. I mean, people turn to religion, they turn to philosophy, they turn to politics, they turn to all sorts of things. But still, we're in the skin, and it's it's our life. But everybody has it.
Right.
And I think that's the kind of mystery of life, and that's what actually haunts us, is the mystery of life itself.
Mm-hmm.
Inside of us, going on all the time, and yet we have to deal with the social world too, and how it affects us.
I think it's fascinating on the back of your book how you talk, and on your website, that you are Vietnam vet, deputy sheriff, private investigator, narcotics agent, casino dealer, and a college professor.
I got around.
I would say so.
I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up.
Right.
In part, it comes from the way I was reared. I was the second child in a family, and some of that, the reason my childhood was the way it was, but I never quite fit in the family.
Mm-hmm.
I always felt like I was the outsider. There were three families. There was my older sister and my mother, and then there was my stepfather and my mother and his children with her, and then there was me caught in the middle of all of this.
Oh, wow!
And I didn't quite fit. So I was given no direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I really appreciate that now, because it allowed me to bounce around through my adult life, heading in what direction at what time was not predetermined in any way, until I went back to school and got my degrees, and then started teaching college, where I really fit for as long as I love the teaching and the classroom. I got tired of the rest of it, as anybody who's worked in education understands.
I can hear you. That's exactly my story, too.
Those meetings just go on
and on. I know.
And people have battles over what?
Exactly what? It's so true. That's so my story. Wow. So have you always, throughout all these different lives you've lived, been a writer?
No, but I think I was building towards it. I actually sat down and wrote my first novel, which never got published, in 1976. I began it and finished it in 1977, and there's actually 4 novels that have followed that down the way that have never gotten published, and that's part of that's another story. But I think what happens when you're a cop.
Mm-hmm.
You learn how to write spare, accurate prose. That's one of the things that, because you're going to go on a witness stand and you encounter attorneys like Oscar Goodman who are going to try to tear your report up. So you want to keep it as spare and as accurate as possible. And I think the idea of writing in that very active voice and telling the narrative the way that you do as a cop led me to some of my aesthetic. And of course, I was a heavy reader all my life,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think I've been influenced by a lot of different writers, primarily Steinbeck. And then in my short fiction, I think the one who influenced me the most there would probably be Catherine Ann Porter. I not only liked her style of writing, but I liked the unsentimental way that she wrote her stories.
I can see that influence in your writing. Now, you're also a novelist and a memoirist.
Yes, and the published memoir is a memoir of Vietnam.
Uh-huh.
The novels vary. There's a couple of them are set in a casino. The Lucky is very loosely based on a family like the Benny Binion's family that owned the Binion's Horseshoe downtown in Las Vegas.
Mm.
And that's the other novel is a casino novel. I wrote one about set in Vegas about three brothers who grew up and went in different directions, and it's probably the only novel, and it's out of print now, unfortunately. It's car tag, but that's the only novel I wrote where I was really looking at the social theme, dealing with the death sentence. The ambiguity behind the death sentence is what I wanted to capture there, because while the law is very clear about certain things, if you kill a cop, you're eligible for the death penalty. It's capital punishment right off the bat.
Uh-huh.
But what are the circumstances?
Right.
What are and who else is involved, and what kind of person is it, and led to all of this? And that's kind of what I was trying to do with that. And I was disappointed that it didn't get any attention. And I'm sure that you dealt with this with other writers and perhaps with your own writing. But when you're dealing with independent publishers, a lot of them just can't survive.
Right.
And that's what happened. That's what happened with that press, and it was unfortunate.
Yes, that's the story so many times.
But back to memoirs. I'm out trying to market a memoir right now.
Oh.
And that one is my childhood, and it came about because my brother-in-law, I have a half-sister named Margaret who died, unfortunately, still in her 50s of cancer. And he had it in his mind, and so did she, that I was actually her full brother and not her half-brother. That was from my mother's second marriage.
Oh.
And so he asked me to take a DNA test. And, how could I turn him down? Okay, I'll do that, just to satisfy everybody's curiosity. And out of the blue, I had a match with a half-sister named Mary Lamson. Then the mystery of who is Mary Lamson came about, and we went to work on that and came up with the correct person, and the fact that my real father was not a Barnes, but was Neil Franklin Lamson, who started a huge, what is now a pretty huge crane manufacturing business in Kennewick, Washington. It's in Phoenix and in Australia as well, and apparently it did very well. And I thought, I saw immediately the Dickensian idea.
Right, exactly.
Theme in there, because I was raised not in deprivation exactly, but certainly deprived of fatherly love and deprived of in other ways, because I was the kid that do this, do the dishes,
Wow.
take care of the other kids,
Mm-hmm.
do this, So I grew up like that, and here I had a real father who made a multi-million-dollar business.
Isn't that amazing?
Or enterprise. But when I started writing it, that became a very minor factor in it, because you start writing your memoirs. You realize all these stories that go on in your childhood that shape you as a writer, and that's what. So it kind of links into that. What shaped you as a writer? I think that early on, because I did turn to reading. I mean, when I was 9 years old, I was reading Sir Henry Rider Haggard, and
wow.
and I think I read Mice of Men when I was 12, No, I was 10. I think I was 10 or 11 when I read Of Mice and Men,
Wow.
and then got captured, and I read The Grapes of Wrath and all of those before I was in my teens. So in a lot of ways, the childhood that I had drove me to isolation within the family, and we moved around a lot. So I didn't have establish a friendship or two or something like that. And we moved. So my friends became my dogs and my books.
Wow, that's a rich story right there.
Well, one would think, but so far, 9 agents haven't been interested in it. They're just too busy with their lives to even. I mean, I think I sent out the query letters about 8 weeks ago, and I haven't heard a word from any of them.
Well, keep querying.
You want to talk? You want to talk? You can cut this if you want to, but do you want to talk about the publishing business?
Sure.
My takes on it.
Please.
Okay. Number one, I think if you're a writer writing in the West, especially in the Southwest, that you're far less likely to attract an agent or get your work in front of a large production, one of the major houses, publishing houses. And I think it's just a regional bias that they prefer writers from the Northwest, from the South, and from the West Coast, and maybe the Midwest to a degree. But generally, if you're not a Cormac McCarthy or somebody like that, they're not interested in looking at your work. I also think that because it's now more than probably any other business, a woman's world, the readership is about 60 to 65% female. The agents now are 70% or more female, and the the editors in the publishing houses are largely female, and they're looking for, obviously, because the readership is female, more works that are more slanted toward women. I don't really have a problem with all of that, except that if you're a male and you're writing writing from the West or the Southwest, you're at the bottom of their list. So when you send in your query letters and stuff like that, I'm sure that's the kind of stuff that also influences their decisions whether they want to even look at your work. I think so because I have a good friend, Mary Sojourner, who's a fine writer, and she lives in the Southwest, and she's experienced the same thing. And she thinks that there's also ageism involved in it. That these agents now are looking for younger, up and coming writers. Yeah, you kind of notice that if you look at poets and writers, the writers that they feature are all generally speaking younger.
Yes.
And a lot of them are minorities.
Yes.
And, once again, I don't have any problem with that, except that if it's a case of a bias that's being built, I mean, there may be a lot of voices here in our region that are not likely to be looked at, and that's sad.
It is sad.
Because there's some good writers. There's some good writers in this region.
Absolutely, I have found so many.
By the way, you live in an area that I loved as a kid.
Really?
I lived in Tularosa. I lived in Tularosa now in Diego, and even Roswell for a while. Roswell was not my favorite place.
Right. No, it's this area that's like a confluence of the rivers is just gorgeous and very rich in culture.
And such a good history. I mean, it's a dark history in some ways.
This might be a good time for you to read something for us.
Sure. I think I am going to read the very opening of Sheets.
That's a good one.
Okay. On the third morning since she returned for her clothes, you feel so bad. The second beer you gulp down seems to take a turn in the middle of your gullet, so you have to lean over the sink in case it and the tuna sandwich you ate sometime before you passed out come out together. You gag a few times, but stave off the vomit. The skillet sits on the stoves, the remain of eggs stuck under 3-day coat of grease. Alone, you think, with dirty pans and dishes, and a dusty cabinet counter is as lone as a man can be. Everything tells you that this day would be no different from the last few. It's a goddamn country western song at high volume. You find it odd how silence can seem louder than noise. Maybe it's just that noise muffles your thoughts. But now in the morning silence, they begin to tighten up like channel locks around your Adam's apple. Your throat constricts, Lungs work like you'll never be able to get a deep breath again, no matter what. You turn off the light for a time until dawn breaks on the horizon, and blinding sunlight from the front room window spears into the kitchen. A galaxy of dust motes swirls in the shaft of light above the table where Mr. 357 lies on its side. You wonder if anger and hate can break a man, not the way your cousin Andy broke horses while leaving their spirited ways intact, but break a man the way dried out wedding cake crumbles at the touch of a finger, and what's left to eat is good only for ants and cockroaches. Cake without moisture is not a good thing. That kind of breaking. But what if anger and hate are all you have? Those and an empty house and a bed with no sheets.
I like the you person point of view.
Well, thank you. I think I've only written 2 stories ever with the second person. It gives you an advantage because you can create intimacy and still create distance at the same time.
Exactly.
So that the reader knows what's going on with your character, but doesn't feel as glued to the voice. Well, that's not even quite what I want to say. Just feels like the writer can still be an outside observer at the same time, getting the sense of what the character is about.
It's not a common voice, and it's hard to do, and you've pulled it off here.
Well thank you.
Yeah,
I think Big City Bright Lights was the first time I ever read a whole book at it, and I think you can carry that off pretty well, and you can see why. It's a really good voice to use for a character who is going through a kind of emotional, is on kind of an emotional trampoline, and I think that's why it works in here, because this guy is really on an emotional trampoline.
he is. I don't want to give it away, but definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, there's quite a few heartbreaks, but as you in the book, but as you say, they're not sentimental.
Yeah, I'm not absolutely against sentiment, because I read other people's work and it has sentiment in it, and I can be drawn in just like any other reader. It's just that I find that if I go in that direction to any great extent, I start feeling like I'm writing something that's sappy.
Right.
I'm just not a sappy person.
Right. And life isn't always sappy, so there you go.
No, it isn't. I think sap is best left in trees.
I agree. So your website, hleebarnes.net, people can find all about you and your books, etc.
Yes, they can. I think I have most of my books in there. I'm not sure. I don't think I have I don't think I have Life as a Country Western Song in there as yet. I've been a little bit lax doing the business end of writing.
I understand that.
But that information is in there.
Are you still teaching college?
I'm supposed to be teaching part-time as emeritus, but I haven't been able to. I had open heart surgery a little over a year and a half ago.
Oh.
And and the odd thing, it came out of nowhere.
Wow.
There were no symptoms. Apparently I had a silent heart attack, what they call it, and didn't even know it. And they put me on an EKG, and they said, "Oh, we're going to." And the next thing I know, about 2 months later, when everything was approved for the Veterans Administration, I was stretched out on an operating table.
Oh my gosh!
And so because of that, the class that I was supposed to teach, I didn't teach it that semester. And then I have to drive to Vegas to teach, so it wasn't convenient. And out here where I am, the internet is terrible, so I can't teach online. And I really miss teaching. I miss those young people. They give you as much energy as they take from you.
They do.
And it's a very balanced.
But you're spending time writing, and that's good. That's good because you're doing that well.
Yeah. And now I'm working on a novel set in World War II on the home front in San Pedro, and my protagonist is a woman who has led her small town in southeastern Washington and ends up in San Pedro making boots for the Marine Corps and with a bunch of other women. And here's what took courage. I'm writing it in the first person.
Good for you. That's not easy to do, to switch the gender there. But, I have to say the story of Nevada, it is in third person, but yet you do capture her voice well. So I have no doubt that you can write it in first person as a woman.
Well, hopefully I can. I was very close with my older sister, and I've had enough experience with 2 marriages. But no, I really learned more about probably women and women's voices working in the casino business, where female dealers in a couple of places outnumbered the males. Mm-hmm. They made the same money. There was no differentiation, and it was kind of interesting to see the dynamic when women and men blend as equals in a job, mm-hmm. and how they still tend to segregate themselves.
Oh, interesting.
And then, one of the more interesting aspects is that you probably heard this with men before or young men. That she's just like one of the guys.
Right.
Well, what you would see in the casino is that some of the women were just like the guys. They would prefer the coming over and sitting down at the table with a bunch of guys and BSing about sports. Whereas the other women were over there in the corner complaining about their husbands or talking about their children or one thing or another. One of these days I'll probably write. I did write a short story in one of my collections mm-hmm. that was about a female dealer who one day she'd had enough, and one thing after another occurred around her while she was at work, and right in the middle of everything, she just backed away from the table, called the boss over, and essentially said, "I quit," and walked out. And as she's walking out of the casino, she's loosening her apron and letting it fall to the ground. Well, a lot of dealers talked about her. I wish I could just walk out of here.
Right.
And I thought, well, it was my opportunity to capture that. I would encourage, despite what I said about the voices in the Southwest and the rest of it, please, writers in the Southwest, those of you who have a desire, keep writing. Find a place. If you stay with it long enough, you'll find an audience.
Right. Well, I've really enjoyed your writing, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
I hope when the next book comes out, if it does,
mm-hmm.
because we all live with it, that we'll talk again.
I hope so.
All right. You take care, Tracy.
You too, Lee.
Bye now.
Bye. And that was H. Lee Barnes talking about his book, Life is a Country Western Song. This is Tracy Hales Vass with Right on Four Corners on KSJE 90.9 FM in Farmington, New Mexico.